Okay, so we're going to dive into a pretty profound and, a very sensitive question. It's all based on a specific spiritual teaching, and it really gets to the heart of what we believe about life, death, and what happens next. So let's explore this.
Most of us grew up with a pretty simple idea of the afterlife, right? It's basically a choice. You go to heaven or you go to hell. But what if that's not the whole story? What if that simple two-option system doesn't really cover everything? Well, the teaching we're looking at today says it absolutely doesn't.
In fact, for those who take their own life, this teaching says their fate is something else entirely. It's not heaven and it's not hell. It's a third possibility, a totally separate path that really challenges our usual ideas about a spirit's journey after they pass on.
All right, so first up, the general rule for spirits. Let's get into the foundational principle here. This teaching lays out what it calls the standard or general rule for what happens to the spirit in this specific situation.
And here's the first and maybe most crucial point. The path to the heavenly realm is, as a general rule, blocked. It's just not an option. The teaching explains that because a person didn't complete their given mission in life, their spirit just, it can't move on to that next stage. So the next section, a place that's neither heaven nor hell. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, if they don't go to the heavenly realm, the only other option is hell, right? Well, this is where things get really different. This teaching introduces a whole other concept. Let's take a look.
So, look at this. After a normal death, a spirit just moves on. It proceeds along its path to the next realm. But in this case, the teaching says the spirit often doesn't even get to go to hell. It's like it can't proceed anywhere. It just becomes stuck. It becomes earthbound.
And there's actually a specific term for this state, jibakurei. And this isn't just some vague, floaty limbo. No, it's described as a spirit being literally tied, like anchored, to the physical world. This could be the actual spot where the death happened, or it could mean being stuck to the family and relatives they left behind, completely unable to cross over. And get this isn't a quick thing. We're talking about a long, long time. The teaching really emphasizes that the process of even understanding what's happened is incredibly slow. I mean, even in the best case scenarios, we're talking several years, just for the spirit to start to figure out its new reality. Okay, but like a lot of spiritual teachings, this isn't a hard and fast 100% rule. There are exceptions. So let's talk about the people who are exceptions to this rule, because the source is very clear about this.
Right, so becoming an earthbound spirit, a jibakurei, it's not inevitable. It doesn't happen to everyone in this situation. The teaching is super clear that for some people, depending on the kind of life they lived, their path ends up being totally different.
And to make the point, the teaching actually gives us some specific examples. It names two famous Japanese writers, Teiko Arishima and Yasunari Kawabata. It says that for them, even with how their lives ended, they were exceptions to the rule. They didn't become earthbound. So of course the big question is, why? What made them so different?
So here's the answer. Using Tako Arishima as the main example, the teaching explains that it's because his entire life was dedicated to a mission, in his case, a humanitarian one. That life's work, that bigger purpose, essentially outweighed his final act. And because of that, his spirit was able to return to the heavenly realm, what this teaching calls the bodhisattva realm.
This brings us to a really important question, right? For the spirits who do get stuck, who do become earthbound, is that it? Is there a way out? Well, yes. The source lays out two possible paths to what it calls awakening or liberation.
Okay, so here are the two ways. The first path is all internal. It's the slow, hard road of self-realization. Over all those years, the spirit eventually, finally, starts to understand the rules of the afterlife and realizes the mistake it made. The second path is external. This is when the spirit gets help, when it's guided by someone else, and that could be a person who's still living, or it could be a guide from the heavenly realm.
Now, about that second path, getting help from the outside. It's not automatic. You can't just wait around for it. The teaching is really specific here. There's a condition. There's something a spirit must have to even be eligible for that kind of salvation.
So what is it? What's the key that unlocks this kind of help? What is it that allows a spirit to receive that guidance and finally move on? What's the deciding factor?
The answer comes down to one word: kudoku. You can think of this as spiritual merit. It's kind of like a spiritual bank account or spiritual capital that you build up throughout your life. Every good deed, every positive action, every selfless thing you do adds to your kudoku.
So here's how it works. To get that external help, the teaching says you must have built up enough kuduku during your life. Basically, you have to have earned it. If a person's life was filled with enough good deeds, if their spiritual balance is in the positive, then that allows for an intervention. It's that positive balance that lets a guide or another spirit step in and help.
Okay, so for our last section, let's look at the why. Why does this teaching say this path should be avoided? What's the core philosophical reason that this act leads to such a difficult, painful spiritual outcome? What's the fundamental problem here?
And here it is, the absolute core of the issue. The teaching says the problem is egoism. It's about thinking only of yourself, of your own pain, and just abandoning everything and everyone when your own future looks bleak. It's seen as an act that turns completely inward, and in doing so, it severs your connection to the bigger spiritual flow of the universe.
Now, it's really important to get this part right. This teaching isn't talking about eternal damnation. It's not a game over scenario. The path to peace is never totally impossible. But what this choice does is make that journey so much harder. It's like taking a profoundly difficult and lonely detour on your soul's path.
And that kind of leaves us with one final big question to think about, doesn't it? If the people who are exceptions are the ones who lived out of mission, and if getting help depends on building up kuduku through good deeds, well, it really suggests that our purpose in life is about something much bigger than just ourselves. So it makes you wonder, what is the life's mission that each of us is here to fulfill?